Thank you very much for your very kind introduction. There's no free lunch. You have to put up with my speech now. Okay. Well, the, President Mary Robinson, the colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a pleasure to be with the winners and the awarders of the Hilton Humanitarian Prize. It creates an infectious feeling of a success and optimism. Goodwill and the good ideas are alive and well in the world today, and they are being translated into good work. It is not always easy to see this fact. I would like to thank you all for making it so clear for us here today. My warmest congratulations to Heifer International for winning the prize and for their many successful activities around the world for many years. Like most people, I can easily appreciate the beauty of the idea of donating livestock and encouraging the recipient to pass on the gift. As a child, I looked after some chickens, I fed them and collected eggs. Seeing some of the eggs hatched and the chicks growing gave me a good introduction to biology and nutrition. I would like to use this opportunity to make just one point. The struggle for health and development is the most important one in the world and ultimately the most effective way to work for justice, security, and solidarity. I think this was the great insight that started the Hilton Foundation and the Heifer International as well. In fact, both of them began in 1944 when a large part of the world were being destroyed by war. The absolute need for activities that protect and foster life was as clear then as it is now, perhaps even clearer. Rather than present you with an argument to prove the value of health work, I would like to tell it with a story. This is a story of the fight to free the world from polio. Polio is a viral disease that attacks the nerve cells in the spinal cord, which controls the muscles. If the muscle needed for breathing or swallowing are affected, the patient may die unless the attack is a minor. Most victims of polio will be crippled for life. The recorded history of this disease is a long 4,000 years, but I will concentrate on some of the recent and current events. In 1916, there was an outbreak of polio here in New York City. That year, there were 27,000 cases in 26 states of the US with 6,000 deaths. New York City alone had 9,000 cases with 2,400 deaths. This epidemic naturally generated a great deal of fear. Thousands of people tried to move out of New York with their children to a safer place. The surrounding towns tried to keep them out for fear of infection. The health authorities tried to reduce the panic by improving the hygiene and restricting the movement. But although the virus had been identified in 1908, they still did not know exactly how it was transmitted. Attempt to find a vaccine had failed. Eventually, it was the winter that ended the outbreak. But epidemics recurred with the warmer weather for the next 4 decades. Children with polio were isolated in hospitals. There were tragic scenes of a family gathering outside, weeping and praying for their children and waving at the hospital windows. Some wards were filled with iron lungs, which looked like metal coffins. each with a child laboring to stay alive in it. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a New Yorker, was 39 years old, he contracted polio and was paralyzed. That was in 1921. He requested the media never to publish the picture of him that showed his leg braces. They respected his request. In 1938, President Roosevelt helped to start the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis. The foundation's drive to support research for a vaccine produced the March of Dimes campaign funded by individual contributions from Americans. This marked the beginning of a huge mobilization of support in this country for the fight against polio. One of the scientists working with the foundation was Jonas Salk, born also here in New York. He discovered and developed inactivated polio vaccine in 1952. 2 years later, some 1.7 million children participated in the field trials for this new vaccine. Its successful introduction caused a sensation in countries around the world panicking over polio epidemics. Things moved quickly in those days. One factor that greatly helped was Salk's approach to patenting. When asked who was the owner of the new vaccine, he famously answered, "The people. Could you patent the sun?" Not only had he made a wonderful discovery, but he had a wonderful heart. Danny Kaye and Bing Crosby supported the March of Dimes, posing for the cameras together in 1954 with a smiling little girl in leg braces. Elvis Presley was pictured in 1956, flanked by a doctor and a nurse, looking happy to be getting a polio shot in his left arm. Many other celebrities joined in. And so the fight against the polio became a massive popular movement in the United States and a highly successful one. There might be several ways to explain this phenomenon. One was solidarity with a large population of children on crutches, in leg braces, or lying in iron lung machines. Another was belief in science and human ingenuity to solve even the most cruel and frightening problems. A third was the effect of a strong support from the top. In this case, commitment from Franklin Roosevelt to successive American president was a decisive help. You could say that in those days, polio was a major public health challenge that brought out the best in people and the best in American president. Meanwhile, there was increasing international recognition of the power of immunization against other diseases to save the lives of children worldwide. This and it increased the population capability led to the realization that some diseases could be eradicated entirely. The most feasible of these was smallpox, a vaccine that provided a complete protection against it, had been in use for over 150 years. In 1959, the World Health Assembly gave it full support for a bid to wipe out smallpox. That 20-year campaign ended in victory in 1980, with the smallpox being officially declared the first human diseases ever to be deliberately eradicated. One of the main players in this effort was Dr. Bill Faggy, who was with us this morning and who left to collect another award. Though the smallpox was finished, polio was still disabling 500,000 children every year. Especially in conditions of poverty, the paralysis condemns its victims to a lifetime of extreme suffering and deprivation. One of the most remarkable aspects of the fight against polio in recent time is the involvement of many NGOs, especially Rotary International. It began in the Philippines, where the Rotary Club organized immunization activities and showed how transmission could be dramatically reduced with the help of volunteers. This encouraged Rotary International to set in 1985 the amazing target of immunizing every child in the world against polio. They have raised $600 million for this effort and raising another $100 million. The WHO, the US CDC, and UNICEF took up the challenge in 1988 and launched the Global Polio Eradication Campaign. The campaign involves giving out 3 doses of vaccine in the first year of life as part of a routine immunization, and in addition, additional doses through national immunization days. It has been advancing region by region. The Americas were certified polio-free in 1994. The Western Pacific region followed in October 2000, and the European region, which include the former Soviet Union, in June 2002. In the remaining 3 WHO regions, Africa, the Eastern Mediterranean, and Southeast Asia, we are very, very close. In Asia, polio transmission can be stopped by the end of this year. It has been occurring in India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, but so far this year, only 102 cases have been reported, well below half the number for the same time last year. The key to success will be a continued strong political support and ensuring that every child in every district is reached in the upcoming immunization days. In Egypt, improved surveillance has revealed the persistent presence and the transmission of a poliovirus in some areas. This can be overcome in the next few months, but it calls for a big increase and improvement in immunization activities. In Africa, the transmission can be stopped by the end of next year, but to achieve this, a dramatic improvement is needed in each campaign so as to reach more children. To stop the epidemic, the largest ever immunization campaign has begun in 23 countries in West and Central Africa. They were launched 2 weeks ago with 23 head of state rallying behind the African Union. More than 1 million volunteers and health workers are going from house to house to immunize 80 million African children. The first round was earlier this month. The second will start on 18th of November. This is the largest internationally synchronized peacetime activity ever to have undertaken in Africa. This will be a fight to the finish. Until the transmission is broken worldwide, there can always be setbacks. There was an explosion of cases in India in 2002, which required an emergency response to contain. In Africa, incidence had gone down to 191 cases last year, thanks in part to the inspiring leadership of Nelson Mandela in the Kick Polio Out of Africa campaign. Then immunization stopped in one state of Nigeria because of demagogic claims that the polio campaign was an international plot to sterilize the woman. Immunization was resumed there on 31st July after an almost 1-year gap. In the meantime, 12 countries had been reinfected. Hence, the need for the massive campaign going on now. We aim to stop polio transmission by the end of next year. So that is where we stand today. The fight against the polio has brought out the best in people, not only in the United States, but in countries all around the world. It is continuing to do so now, even in extremely difficult conditions like those in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Sudan. Health workers have been willing to risk their lives to get the vaccines to the children, and combatants have suspended hostilities to let them through. We could say that this whole global effort began exactly 50 years ago with the first big polio vaccine trials, which started right here in New York. The success we are fighting for now has enormous practical implications, of course. It will protect everyone without exception from a crippling disease, strengthen health system, and ensure a massive return on a bold investment. But I would like to stress it's a symbolic value as well. In a time of fear of uncertainty, it will restore confidence in the ability of human goodwill, ingenuity, and cooperation to prevail over trouble and achieve a common goal. We cannot be simplistic about this kind of effort. Each new advance brings with it a new challenge. Victory over smallpox led to the danger of the smallpox virus being used as a biological weapon. We have to ensure that the polio virus will not have that same fate. The March of Dimes took place in another time, but looking at the achievement of an earlier generation can provide a wealth of insight for the present and the future. Perhaps the most striking and encouraging one is that everyone in every generation can see the value of a healthy life and be glad to join in the struggle to achieve it. Heifer International and the Hilton Foundation have found excellent ways to let this aspect of human nature flourish and fulfill its potential. With today's award, they put a well-deserved spotlight on the enormous contribution that private organizations and foundations make to international health. They encourage all of us to do everything we can to support this effort and join forces with them. Nothing could be more worthwhile. Thank you very much.